Coming up on Levin TV, Robert Mueller, the Democrats' impeachment stalking horse. It all starts now.
This is where freedom rings.
If you believe in America, if you believe in the Constitution empowers us. It's a new day. America's back. America's back, and America's going to get strong again. We're going to defend America, and we're going to defend our interests.
Liberty's voice, Levin TV.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin on Levin TV, on CRTV, our wonderful network. By the way, isn't this festive? See the Christmas color, red? It also happens to be the hammer and sickle old Soviet color, but that's neither here nor there. Levin TV mug, it's got my photo on the back. We'll look at that quickly, but look at that. You can get that too. Where's my ShamWow rag too? But honestly, if you're looking to give a gift for Christmas, Hanukkah, or just to a loved one to really impress them, you can get a Mark Levin mug, this mug on that mug. And for a $99 subscription per year, you get all of our programming, including Levin TV, plus a choice of mugs. This happens to be my favorite. And, or you can purchase it and give it as a gift too. But that's not why I'm here today. I hope you heard my radio show Friday, where I went into this Flynn matter in some depth. And I want to address it again in kind of a different way right now as well. The day after the election, the very day after the election, I went on the air and I said, the Democrats are going to seek to criminalize their differences with President Trump. They're going to seek to get a special counsel. They're going to seek to impeach him because they feel he's illegitimate and they were counting on winning. And they're all about power. They're not about country. I'm sorry. They're not about country. They're not about liberty, that's for sure. They're not about property rights, that's for sure. They're about power. And the only way they have power is through the government. They do not accept the legitimacy of an opposition viewpoint, let alone an opposition party. And that's what's going on here. I want to remind you what I said on February 15, 2017. February 15, 2017, right here on Levin TV. Go. So they're trying to turn this into Watergate or Iran-Contra or whatever it is, because that's what Democrats and liberals do. And what they're really trying to do, as I've told you day in and day out from day one, this is a silent coup. Whether it was the Electoral College and the popular vote, whether it's blocking his cabinet appointees, whatever it is, this is a silent coup. By silent coup, I mean, you know, no gunfire or anything of the sort. But that's exactly what's taking place here. Yeah, it is a silent coup. I've been saying that since the beginning of his presidency. Again, challenging the legitimacy of the Electoral College, violence in the streets, violence on Inauguration Day, unleashing these investigative committees almost out of the starting block, Schumer and others demanding a special counsel on Russian collusion. And obviously there's no Russian collusion during the course of the election with the Trump campaign, because there have been no charges to that effect. No crimes related to that have been charged, as a matter of fact, with 16 hack investigators, more than half of whom have donated to Obama or Hillary Clinton, and you're not charging anybody on substantive crimes unless it's Manafort and Gates on crimes that they claim occurred years and years ago, having nothing to do with the campaign and nothing to do with collusion and the Russians. You're kind of revealing that you're on a hunt. You're on a hunt to do what? They're on a hunt to take out Trump. They're on a hunt to get Trump impeached. And again, I see that all over columnists today, all over news articles today. Well, this is where that whole notion of what's going on began, right here on Levin TV and on the radio, my radio program. Now, on June 15, 2017, I reiterated the point, what this was about: impeachment. They want to impeach Trump, and this is how they hope to do it. Mueller and the claim of obstruction. Check this out from June of this year. Go.
Now we have a special counsel. There's absolutely no reason to have a special counsel, but it's something the Democrats want and something the Republicans capitulated to. The Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Rod Rosenstein, is a disgrace. Has no guts. He buckled to the politics. There was absolutely no justification for what he did. None. So now we have this roving prosecutor whose subject of investigation is whatever subject he decides to investigate. Whatever matter he decides to investigate, it's as broad as he chooses to make it. Now, is that what constitutional government is about, ladies and gentlemen? We now have a federal prosecutor, independent of every branch of the federal government, who has as his objective to take down the President of the United States. And he has quickly moved to hire the most left-wing Democrat fellow prosecutors he can, with record of large contributions to left-wing Democrats. And they're already leaking. They're already leaking. That they are focused on obstruction of justice charges against the President of the United States. Now, I happen to know, as a matter of fact, the Department of Justice has another legal memorandum from my own experience there, which states, from the perspective of the Department of Justice, you can't indict a sitting president. Now, I happen to think that's wrong, by the way, but it doesn't matter if I think it's wrong. That is the formal institutional position of the United States Department of Justice, Republican or Democrat. So why would they be investigating the President of the United States for obstruction of justice when, number one, it's an impossibility in this case, since he has the constitutional power to fire any inferior officer for any reason? And number two, the facts, even if he didn't have that power, simply do not justify it. If that's the purpose of the special counsel's investigation, among others, and if it is the official position of the Department of Justice that you cannot indict a sitting president, then you know what Robert Mueller's doing? Do you know, Mr. Producer? He's going to write a report one day. Now, you'll read this at National Review in 3 months. Stick with me. He's going to write a report one day.
Stop. And you just read it in National Review, June, July, August, September, October, November, 5.5 months later. Anyway, go ahead.
Which he knows, which Comey knows, which Schumer knows, and they're all friends, those three. They're all tight. Will be used as the basis for impeachment if they can win the House of Representatives. Mr. Mueller may be investigating individuals and so forth, but his purpose for being unleashed against the President of the United States is to make the case for impeachment, not indictment. This is very, very important to understand. This is why the Democrats are so enthusiastic about him in particular and about that position, and why they want it as broad as possible. This is the plan. This is the plan. I don't doubt it for a minute. And the Republicans allowed it to happen. And the Deputy Attorney General of the United States triggered it. And Mr. Comey, who has exposed himself to you and me as a diabolical figure, he's the operator who set the whole thing up, because he was furious that the president would dare to fire him, the great Jim Comey. Mr. Mueller has already demonstrated that he's not the sheriff with the white hat riding into town. This whole notion of an all-powerful prosecutor who can roam through the statute books, who can issue subpoenas, who can cover whatever areas he seeks to cover, who can threaten whatever individual he wants to threaten. This is alien to the American justice system. Even he should have to live within the context of checks and balances, but he doesn't. But he doesn't. This is the point. The Democrat Party, and the left in particular, is destroying this country. Whether it's its foot soldiers in the streets, or whether it's a hijacking of our institutions. A hijacking of our institutions.
Now, I could have said all that today, but I wanted you to remember that I said it all back this summer in June. Obstruction, that's the case they're trying to lay out, and the basis for impeachment. And again, you're seeing some conservative writers today or the past week or so making that point. It's always been abundantly clear to me. It's been abundantly clear to me. Now, let's talk briefly about what it is that they're chasing down Michael Flynn over. And we also know that an associate of Michael Flynn's told Fox News that the reason Flynn has agreed to plea is because he's financially destroyed, he's emotionally destroyed, and his family begged him. They had enough. You might also recall that Mr. Mueller was going after his son. So this man is a retired general. He served his nation with enormous honor. He spent his entire career sacrificing for this nation. And this is what it's come down to: a plea for a false statement to the FBI. And let me remind you, either through a FISA court ruling, a warrant, or through the back door where his name was unmasked through espionage techniques used against the Russians. When Mr. Flynn was being interviewed by the FBI, they already knew what he told the Russians. They had it on tape. They already knew what he told the Russians. So they didn't interview him to get information about what he told the Russians. They knew what he told the Russians. They interviewed him to set him up and take him out. To set him up and take him out. And there's some people speculating out there that the prosecutors are holding back on this all-important criminal charge or groups of criminal charges and so forth. No, they're not. You don't lead with a false statement, get somebody to plead to a false statement, and then have a witness who the jury would find reliable. I talked about this Friday on radio, too. You put that witness up on a stand in your cases, if there is a case, and immediately defense counsel will rip them apart. What did you plead to? Lying to the FBI? Well, why do we believe you today? You get the scenario. And if, in fact, they had something related to collusion during the course of the campaign, they would lead with that in a plea deal, because that could bring, quote unquote, everything down around it, not a single charge and then a plea to a single false statement to the FBI. So I wanted to clear that up too. There's a piece in USA Today by a fellow, James Robbins, who is on the board of contributors to USA Today, and he's taught at the National Defense University, the Marine Corps University. He was Special Assistant Secretary of Defense George W. Bush. Anyway, he's got some heft. What he says here is, on Friday, President Trump's former National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, pleaded guilty to lying to federal investigators about a perfectly legal conversation he had during the presidential transition with then Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Hello, the conversation is legal. It also occurred after the election, during the transition, and it wasn't just focused on Russia. Flynn was apparently asked to contact a number of foreign governments. You have an incoming administration where the incoming administration is, number one, trying to figure out what's going on, and number two, relaying its positions on policies. Because after all, the conversation occurred, I believe it was December 29th, where we're going to have a new president in 3 weeks. Moreover, Barack Obama, on the way out the door, was trying to screw Israel in the way Israel has never been attacked before, certainly not by us, an ally. And the Trump incoming administration wanted to make it abundantly clear that they strongly disagree with what Obama was doing. Again, nothing illegal about it whatsoever. Oh, the Logan Act, passed in 1799 and used never. Hello? Never. Zero. Zero. And basically, it says that a private citizen is not free to conduct foreign policy. And you can imagine why they were concerned about that in 1799. They couldn't keep track of everything. But Mr. Flynn was hardly a private citizen. He was the incoming national security advisor to the president-elect. So that whole thing is a preposterous argument, and yet I have no doubt that the Democrats and Mr. Mueller may be hanging their hat on that as a way of, again, claiming obstruction and improprieties that don't exist. As I said in June, a president of the United States is free to fire any subordinate. He is in the Constitution. The subordinates are not. He is free to fire any subordinate for any reason. It's not possible to be obstruction of justice when you're complying with your constitutional responsibilities. Moreover, as I've said 1,000 times, 1 second before Trump fired Comey, the Democrats were howling like a bunch of hyenas demanding that Comey be fired. If Hillary Clinton had been elected president of the United States and fired Jim Comey, they'd give her a ticker tape parade. So they despised Jim Comey. And we played a montage of that several months ago here on Levin TV. One after another, he has to go. Schumer, he has to go. Harry Reid, in retirement, he has to go. Pelosi has to go. Maxine Waters has to go. On and on. Suddenly, he's angelic. Suddenly, he's Joseph Story. Suddenly, everything he says is to be relied on, even though we know, as a matter of fact, he was a leaker to the New York Times, among other places. Even though we know, as a matter of fact, he covered up for Hillary Clinton in the espionage investigation, among other things. Anyway, Mr. Robbins goes on. Flynn should not have lied, and why he chose to remains a mystery, but the substance of the single-count indictment against Flynn shows that Special Counsel Mueller's investigation has strayed far from its original purpose. No, it hasn't. The original purpose was Trump's impeachment. I understand what he's saying, what everybody is saying, that he's supposed to be investigating alleged collusion with the Russians during the course of the campaign by Trump officials or Trump himself to influence the outcome. There was none of that. There is none of that. We've had the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, the House Intelligence Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, 1,000 reporters, 100 news organizations, a special counsel. There is nothing. Nobody's produced a scintilla of anything. Flynn was fully in his rights, making the call to Kislyak. Despite the best efforts of the anti-Trumpers, it's still not illegal to talk to Russians. Even Democratic former CIA and Defense Secretary Leon Panetta said it was a stretch to say these contacts broke the law. I don't think it's in keeping with the spirit of the transition, however, one of President-elect Trump's national security advisors told Politico on November 10, 2016, to try to push through agenda items that are contrary to the president-elect's positions. So in other words, they were concerned that it was Obama at the last second, knowing that Hillary wouldn't be president of the United States, who was trying to enshrine his policies and project them onto the incoming president. That, to me, is the real unethical activity that was taking place. The Trump transition team feared for good reason that the lame duck Obama administration was poisoning the well with Russia and pursuing spiteful anti-Israel policies on the way out the door. Trump asked Flynn, his soon-to-be national security advisor, to open a semi-official channel to Russia through its ambassador. We're not sure if it's Trump or one of his surrogates, but it really doesn't matter, to discuss future cooperative efforts against the Islamic State and the UN vote on an anti-Israel resolution. As lawyer Alan Dershowitz argued, not only was that request not criminal, it was the right thing to do. The phone call to Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, and any other such contacts with foreign officials should be viewed in that context. This was not, for example, on the level of colluding with shadowy Russian intelligence contacts to create disinformation to try and swing the election, as the authors of the Clinton-connected Trump smear dossier did, Fusion GPS. There was ample precedent for the president-elect to put out feelers to foreign leaders. A memo from the Podesta files released by WikiLeaks shows that the Obama team had planned for the president-elect and senior officials, this is a quote, to begin confidential policy consultations with key actors in the U.S. and abroad between Thanksgiving and Inauguration Day. Obama also openly used emissaries and go-betweens to meet with foreign leaders during his transition. And for overwrought members of the resistance who think the unenforceable Logan Act is suddenly in play, recall that in the 2008 period, then-candidate Obama arranged substantive foreign policy discussions with numerous foreign dignitaries and leaders during an overseas campaign trip before the election. Now, that sounds pretty compelling to me. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, the Obama administration itself, January 13, 2017, before the President of the United States' inauguration, before he was sworn in by just a few days, their State Department spokesman, Mark Toner, had this to say about that. Go.
You probably have seen reports starting yesterday, but then more of them this morning about contact between the incoming national security advisor and the Russian ambassador. I'm just wondering, from the State Department's point of view, is this something that's of concern at all, or I'll just leave it there and then follow up?
Again, not necessarily. I've seen the reports. I don't think they've been confirmed or corroborated yet.
Stop.
But
the reason you said that is somebody leaked the information. There was, they were surveilling the Russian ambassador, and they picked up a conversation with Mike Flynn and the Russian ambassador, and it was leaked to the media. So somebody committed a felony because of that surveillance occurred, and either that resulted from the unmasking of Flynn by one of the Obama officials, or as part of the warrant that the FISA court issued in October. So one of the two ways, but leaking it is a felony because that information is classified. That's why he's saying it hasn't been confirmed yet, but that's not even the point. Go ahead.
you know, that's as he's part of the transition team. That's really for them to speak to and how they are engaging. I mean, the president-elect is also engaged on his own with many world leaders. So I don't want to speculate, and I don't want to.
No, there's nothing. This building doesn't see anything necessarily, inappropriate about contact between members of the incoming administration and foreign officials, no matter what country they're from.
No.
Right?
No. And again, this has been ongoing. I mean, we stand ready if they want to work through the State Department to contact some of these individuals, but we have no. No comment or no problem with them doing such on their own.
Wow, imagine that. That's a statement of fact, a statement of the obvious, a statement the media, however, will not, resolutely report to the American people when this is brought up repeatedly by the Democrats and, of course, the media themselves. There's nothing wrong with the context whatsoever. So there's nothing wrong with the context whatsoever. They occurred after the election. They occurred just prior to the President Trump's inauguration and swearing in. So it didn't occur during the election. Couldn't have been collusion about the election. Couldn't have been collusion with the Russians about the election to influence the election based on the timeline itself and the fact of the communication. Nothing inappropriate about that. They already knew all that, and they already knew what Flynn had told the Russians or what they discussed, and he's not being charged or was not charged with anything substantive based on his discussions with the Russians, nothing whatsoever. It's that when he was interviewed by the FBI, he said something or denied something that he shouldn't have denied. It was misleading, if not an outright lie, according to the FBI, according to the prosecutors. So what is this? If we didn't have a special counsel, he wouldn't have been charged with anything because he wouldn't have done anything. This is what they mean by process crime. A perjury is a process crime. False statements, 18 United States Code 1001, is a process crime. Obstruction is a process crime. Suborning perjury is a process crime. What I'm saying is, if special counsel Mueller didn't exist, Mr. Flynn wouldn't have had to plead to anything. He wouldn't have done anything wrong. Wouldn't have done anything wrong. And I still don't know why he does exist, since the argument for his existence in the first place was to investigate collusion with the Russians during the election that influenced the election. He's brought 4 cases so far, Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates, on matters that have not only nothing to do with the election, nothing to do with collusion, but occurred years before, or involved their failure to report as foreign agents, which is never charged, but it was in this case. Mr. Papadopoulos, another false statement about a meeting he held or meetings that he sought to hold. Big deal. Again, perfectly legal. And now we have Flynn, another process crime. One count. That's the best they could do. And you got to feel for the guy. I feel for the guy because it's obvious he fought them and fought them and fought them and fought them, but he went broke. As a matter of fact, there was one report he's selling his house. He has nothing left. And the family can't take it anymore. So he's probably falling on a sword for his family. He has to come out from under somehow, some way. These are mob tactics that are being used against these men. To what end? To remove Trump from office. Mueller and his liberal Democrat prosecutor friends, Mueller, who's best friends with Comey, Mueller, who preceded Comey as FBI director. That's what's going on here. Now, Dianne Feinstein underscores the point I made in June and actually earlier, that this is all about impeachment, it's all about obstruction. All about impeachment, all about obstruction. She was at NBC Meet the Press yesterday, and here's what she had to say. Go.
Well, let me begin by saying this. As you know, I'm ranking on Judiciary, and the Judiciary Committee has an investigation going as well, and it involves obstruction of justice. And I think what we're beginning to see is the putting together of...
Stop a second. The Senate Judiciary Committee is investigating obstruction of justice. The Senate Judiciary Committee is not a criminal investigative organization. The Senate Judiciary Committee doesn't have the tools to undertake such an investigation. The Senate Judiciary Committee is an oversight committee. It's a legislative committee. They're doing an investigation of obstruction, even under the impeachment clause of the Constitution. It is the Senate that awaits any impeachment charges from the House. It's where the trial takes place in the United States Senate. So if that, in fact, is what the Senate Judiciary Committee is doing, it's incredibly inappropriate. Now, I don't know if she speaks for the Senate Judiciary Committee. I doubt it. I doubt she speaks for Senator Grassley, the chairman, but she just claimed to. She said what the committee is doing is they're undertaking an obstruction of justice investigation. So you know what she's doing. She's doing what I said she's doing and the Democrats are doing. They're trying to lay the predicate or the pretext for impeachment. Go ahead.
Case of obstruction of justice. I think we see this in the indictments, the 4 indictments and pleas that have just taken place.
All right, let's stop there. You don't see that. Look, Manafort and Gates, how do you see obstruction and justice there? Obstruction of justice here, that involves taxes, the movement of money, the failure to report as foreign agents. And I don't know that they're guilty of anything. Remember, we just had what the prosecutor said, and they're fighting it. They've gone broke. They're losing everything they ever all the assets they ever put together, but they're fighting it. So how does that show obstruction of justice? In the case of the former general, how does that show obstruction of justice? He falsely spoke to the FBI. He. And we'll see if somebody else did. That's fine, too. But how is that obstruction of justice against the president? Well, the case they're going to make is, look at all these people around him lying, and then they'll try and take some public comments he may have made during the course of the campaign, and then they're going to claim that Comey, comes back to Comey, that he fired Comey to obstruct the investigation, which was never obstructed, which the deputy FBI director at the time, the acting FBI director when Comey was fired, said that no, no resources have been stopped. They have the resources they need. And of course, as a matter of fact, it hasn't been stopped because what Trump could have said is, I order you to stop. That never happened either. Go ahead.
Some of the comments that are being made, I see it in the hyper-frenetic attitude of the White House, the comments every day, the continual tweets, and I see it most importantly in what happened with the firing of Director Comey.
There you go.
And it is my belief that that is directly because he did not agree to lift the cloud of the Russia investigation.
Now stop right there. So this is where they're headed. I'm telling you, it wasn't hard to predict. So the firing of James Comey, who they wanted fired, is the basis for the obstruction of justice. And they're going to build everything around that. That's what Mueller's doing. That's what Comey wanted. You're not allowed to fire Comey according to Comey. And that's what Comey wanted. And he got the special counsel. He said this, he wanted a special counsel. They got their special counsel, and that's what's taking place. It's no longer about Russian collusion. It's no longer about the campaign. It's about taking out the president on process arguments. Taking out the president on process arguments. Well, maybe he didn't know what he was trying to cover up. Maybe he didn't know what he was trying to obstruct, but he did. And that's bad enough. And that's bad for the country. And that's unjust. And when people hear obstruction and stuff like that, it's very uncomplicated, right? Oh, he obstructed an investigation. We can't have a president who does that. The other thing they're trying to do is paralyze his administration. Now, everybody around him scared to death to talk to the FBI and to drag down his numbers. Even though the economy's doing much better, even though they just passed or will pass this tax bill, which I strongly oppose, but a lot of people support, even though he's confronting the North Koreans and the Iranians, and I believe he will name Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel. He's doing all these things that are really remarkable, really important, solid things that he's doing. His negatives are through the roof. And you can't tell me it's just because people don't like what he tweets. It is a drumbeat day in and day out by the media. It is a drumbeat day in and day out by people like Feinstein. And it is fed by the special counsel who sees exactly what's going on, which is exactly why he hired all these liberal Democrat prosecutors who openly donated to the Clinton and Obama campaigns. Now, circling back to that point, something else we learned. We learned it in the New York Times and we learned it in the Washington Post. But here from the New York Times, Mueller removed top agent in Russia inquiry over possible anti-Trump texts. Let me get into this. Special counsel Mueller removed a top FBI agent this summer from his investigation into Russian election meddling after the Justice Department's Inspector General began examining whether the agent had sent text messages that expressed anti-Trump political views, according to 3 people briefed on the matter. The agent, Peter Strzok, Zorzak, I guess, Zarzak, is considered one of the most experienced and trusted FBI counterintelligence investigators. He helped lead the investigation into whether Hillary Clinton had mishandled classified information on her private email account, and then played a major role in the investigation into links between President Trump's campaign and Russia. Now let's unpack some of that. He led the investigation of Hillary Clinton in the espionage case. And what did he do? He did everything he could to protect her. She wasn't questioned until the weekend before Comey comes out and makes a statement, right? She wasn't questioned under oath. They didn't record her. They didn't even take notes of the conversation, so she could never be charged with false statements to see if her notes or whatever contradicts something she may have said before or have done before. They rewrote the statute unilaterally from gross negligence in the handling of the classified information to specific intent. Never charged with obstruction, right? Never charged with false statements, never charged with perjury, never charged with any of it, never put in front of the grand jury. None of this took place. None of it. And you'll remember Comey, now infamously, 2 months before he even had that press conference exonerating her as a criminal/legal matter, you'll remember he hadn't even interviewed it was 24 of key witnesses. Hadn't even interviewed them. Hadn't even gotten access to the important laptops. Compare that to what Mueller's doing. This guy who led that investigation for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the top dog leading the investigation, Peter Strzok, S-T-R-Z-O-K, was then put in charge of the investigation involving Trump here, the Trump campaign in Russia. And he's texting anti-Trump messages. I wanted you to understand the full context of this. Mr. Strazuk was reassigned this summer from Mr. Mueller's investigation to the FBI's Human Resources Department, where he has been stationed since. The people briefed on the case said that's an odd place to put a guy like this, isn't it? He's being punished through human resources, so they put him in charge of human resources? Should have put him on the Afghanistan detail. The people briefed on the case said the transfer followed the discovery of text messages in which he and a colleague reacted to news events like presidential debates in ways that could appear critical to Mr. Trump. Why don't they release those text messages? Well, I'll be the first to ask for that. Why don't they release the text messages, ladies and gentlemen, so the American people can see them? Why do we need to rely on leaks to the New York Times, which is notorious for its partisan reporting? The Inspector General's Office of the Department of Justice said that as part of a larger inquiry it was conducting into how the FBI had handled investigations related to the 2016 election, the office was reviewing allegations involving communications between certain individuals and will report its findings regarding those allegations promptly upon completion of the review of them. Yet it's leaked. A lawyer for Strazuk did not return several messages. A spokeswoman for the Justice Department said, "We are aware of the allegation and are taking any and all appropriate steps." The agent's reassignment shows Mueller moved swiftly. Here's where they rebuild the case and Mueller and the organization. The agent's reassignment shows that Mueller moved swiftly in the face of what could be perceived as bias by one of his agents amid a politically charged inquiry into Mr. Trump's campaign and administration. This would be the same Mueller who hired, I think it's 9 of 16 prosecutors who donated to Obama and or Hillary. He's so concerned about appearances of partisanship. But the existence of the text messages is likely to fuel claims by Mr. Trump that he's the target of a witch hunt. See, this is the New York Times positioning themselves and Trump. The discovery of the text messages came at a crucial moment in Mueller's investigation. At the time, Mr. Mueller was ramping up his inquiry into Mr. Trump's former advisors, while also coming under criticism for putting many donors to Democrat candidates on his team. Some conservatives encouraged Mr. Trump to fire Mueller and so forth. Now, current and former law enforcement officials who worked for Mr. Strazuk said they had never seen any evidence that he allowed his political views to influence the investigations he led. No. They said that Mr. Strazuk, a former Army officer, and you know what? I love when they do this, the left. They hate the military, but if one of their guys was in the military, you know, they say, oh, he's a former Army officer, like Conyers. You know he served in Korea? Yeah, we do. So what? A lot of decent, wonderful men served in Korea and aren't busy sexually abusing other human beings. But he was deeply trusted by Jim Comey. Now, isn't that fascinating? Do you see all the overlap and all the incestuous activity going on here? Why would a guy who worked so closely with Comey and did this phony Hillary Clinton investigation, here Trump fires Comey and he's in charge of investigating the lead investigator in the Trump/Russia/ collusion investigation? Do you think he has any scores to settle, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah, I think he does. Well, Devin Nunes, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, is a little ticked off. And I've told you before, I find Nunes to be a great hero because he's taken enormous abuse for his outstanding work. And Byron York at the Washington Examiner, he says, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes has issued an angry demand to the FBI and Department of Justice to explain why they kept the committee in the dark of the reason Special Counsel Mueller kicked a key supervising FBI agent off the Trump-Russia investigation. Stories in both the Washington Post and New York Times on Saturday reported that Peter Strazuk, who played a key role in the original FBI investigation into the Trump-Russia matter, and then a key role in Mueller's investigation, and who earlier had played an equally critical role in the FBI's Hillary Clinton email investigation, was reassigned out of the Mueller office because of anti-Trump texts he exchanged with a top FBI lawyer, Lisa Page, with whom he was having an extramarital affair. Oh, but he served in the Army. Strazuk was transferred to the FBI's Human Resources Office, an obvious demotion, in July. The Washington Post reported that Strazuk and Page exchanged text messages that expressed anti-Trump sentiments and other comments that appeared to favor Clinton. So he just finishes investigating Clinton. No problem there, you know, no taping, no notes. bring her in, we'll talk to her 2 or 3 hours. No sweat, no grand jury, no pressure, none of that stuff. And then he's trashing Trump. Word of the messages and the affair were news to Nunes, even though the committee had issued a subpoena that covered information about Strzok's demotion more than 3 months ago. The committee's broadly worded subpoena for information related to the so-called Trump dossier went to the FBI and DOJ on August 24. In follow-up conversations on the scope of the subpoena, committee staff told the FBI and DOJ that it included information on the circumstances of the agent's reassignment. On October 11, Nunes met with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. In that meeting, Nunes specifically discussed the committee's request for information about Strzok. In an October 31 committee staff meeting with the FBI, Bureau officials refused a request for information about Strzok. On November 20, the committee again requested an interview with Strzok. 3 days earlier, on November 17, Strzok met with the Senate Intelligence Committee. On November 29, Nunes again spoke to Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein and again discussed Strzok. On December 1, the committee again requested to speak with Strzok. After each occasion, the FBI and Department of Justice did nothing. Now, in what appears to be an orchestrated leak, both the Washington Post and New York Times published the reason for his demotion, along with concerns that the revelation might help President Trump. Well, yes, it will be of concern to Trump's defenders and to defenders of fair investigations generally that such an important figure in both the Clinton and Trump probes privately expressed bias. It will be important for investigators and the public to see Strzok's and Page's texts, yes, to assess the extent of the problem. But in any event, Nunes is extremely unhappy, not only with the revelation of the bias, but with the FBI's resistance. By hiding from Congress and from the American people, documented political bias by a key FBI head investigator for both the Russia collusion probe and the Clinton email investigation. The FBI and DOJ engaged in a willful attempt to thwart Congress's constitutional oversight responsibility. Well, Chairman Nunes, Senator Feinstein in the other body, in the Senate, on the Senate Judiciary Committee, she said they're conducting an obstruction investigation. Not interested in this stuff. Now, this just gets into the way of what they're trying to accomplish. To add insult to injury, at just the moment the leaked stories appeared, the Justice Department, out of the blue, notified Nunes that it would meet with some of the committee's demands for information it had been refusing for months. Of course, that didn't make the chairman happy, and now he's looking at possible contempt for the Deputy Attorney General and the FBI Director, and I certainly don't blame him because what they've done is contemptuous. The President said over the weekend, he tweeted that the FBI has lost its credibility, or words to that effect. Immediately into the breach jumped Eric Holder, who has no credibility whatsoever, to say, no, the FBI's credibility, it's the President who doesn't have credibility. Others have jumped to the FBI's defense, saying these are hardworking men and women who protect us. We're not talking about the hardworking men and women of the FBI. I don't think the President is. I'm certainly not. We're talking about the political hacks at the top of the FBI, like Mr. McCabe, the Deputy FBI Director, whose wife ran for a state Senate position in Virginia and received over $500,000 in support through organizations backed by Terry McAuliffe, the bag man for the Clintons, the Democrat governor. Mr. McCabe should have recused himself. He did not. We're talking about Fusion GPS and how senior officials at the FBI, perhaps even Comey, I believe, used that report as a basis to get a FISA warrant and even tried to engage Mr. Steele, Christopher Steele, the ex-British intelligence officer, who used, among others, contacts in the Kremlin to write a smear report that was paid for ultimately by Hillary Clinton's campaign in the DNC. What was the role of the FBI in that? We're talking about high-level leaks, both from Mr. Mueller's operation and perhaps from the FBI that would have this information that Mr. Mueller has before actions are even taken in court. The day before, 2 days before, names are leaked, actions are leaked. It's leaking like a sieve. Well, who else would be leaking but the people who control the sieve? And I could go on and on about the tawdry contract that's taking place, right? But how dare the President of the United States mention this? The entire Watergate scandal was fed to Woodward and Bernstein in the Washington Post by the then Deputy FBI Director. They leak, and they leak badly. and they do a lot of damage, and they try to influence investigations. That's exactly what's going on here. After Jim Comey met with President Trump in Trump Tower when the president was president-elect, you'll recall, and brought to his attention a summary or talking points or whatever it was about the Fusion GPS report, it leaked almost immediately after the fact of that meeting in order to smear Donald Trump. Remember about the hookers and what they did on the beds and all the rest of it and what Donald Trump liked? Lies, lies, and more lies. And you had BuzzFeed, a left-wing site, put out the entire report. You had CNN cherry-picked from the report. This is really loathsome stuff. This is really loathsome stuff. You talk about destroying freedom of the press. It's not Trump. It's the press destroying freedom of the press. Last week, it was all the sexual barbarism and predatory conduct that was going on, media members. We counted, I think, 19 or 20 of them. Notice that's off the front pages now. Franken's off the front pages. Conyers off the front pages. All these dogs are, you know, in terms of their behavior, are off the front pages. And now it's Trump, Trump, Trump. Well, there's another question asked by a friend of mine, a professor, William Jacobson, who has a wonderful, wonderful website called Legal Insurrection. He says, Michael Flynn pleaded guilty last week to lying to FBI investigators regarding conversations Flynn had with the Russian ambassador in late December. Barely 3 weeks, that would be, I should say, December 2016. If I've been saying December 2017 throughout the program, I stand corrected. December 2016. Barely 3 weeks before the Trump administration was sworn into office. Such transitions, contact foreigners are routine, and so forth. But he's pointing this out. Why is Mueller investigating anything post-election when his overall direction is to be investigating what took place during the election? Which brings us back to the effort to impeach Trump, which has always been the effort. And I just want to show you how far out of the way these people go when it comes to the media, when it comes to trying to take out Trump and so forth. Here we have ABC News' Brian Ross. I had a run-in with Brian Ross, among others, when he was accusing me of being a right-wing something or other in March of this year, when I was pointing out through newspaper articles and so forth and so on, all the espionage activity that had been taking place under the prior administration against the incoming administration. That actually went back during the course of the campaign. And I was using their articles. You remember this. You can go back and check it. You know, I was on Fox as well, on the radio as well, talking about this at length. Well, certain individuals in the media, most individuals in the media, got very angry with me because I put together what they had written, and I kind of figured it out. Not 100%, maybe 90%. Well, Brian Ross was very upset about that. He never contacted me, never spoke to me, dismissed me as some right-wing this, that, or conspiracy theorist. This guy has been practicing journalism malpractice for his entire career. I don't even know why he's on the air. I even put on my Facebook site and tweeted out, I believe it was Friday or Saturday, why is this guy still, you know, with ABC? He got this so wrong. Now, what did he get wrong? Believe it or not, we're going to turn to CNN's reliable sources just for the fun of it. Check this out. Go ahead.
The thing that baffles me about this is why would it take ABC News hours to correct this when every other media outlet was right? Also, and I'm going to be very blunt about this, I'm sorry. This is
correct what? The original report by Brian Ross, and he's incorrect here, and repeated by most of the media, was that this took place during the course of the campaign. And the timeline simply is incorrect. By my calculation, December 29 is past the first Tuesday in November. So it was well after the election, actually. And the media were burping this out over and over again, citing ABC News, and then somebody, either through social media or somebody who works for them, got their attention and said, this timeline's not right. This timeline's not right. I did it on Friday on my radio show. I said how ridiculous this is. This is baloney. The guy's timeline is wrong and he ought to be off the air for good. Go ahead.
It's not Brian Ross's first mistake in reporting breaking news inaccurately, linking Saddam to the anthrax attacks in 2001, linking the Aurora shooter to a Tea Party by using the wrong name. ABC should have been on notice. Anytime there's breaking news and special events, you run the risk of misreporting. having anchored at CNN a report about nerve gas in Laos that turned out to be unsupportable, having to apologize. Mistakes are made.
I've heard from people inside ABC that after 4 weeks, they're still not really certain, you know, can he come back, and is he, when he reports something, is it going to be seen as credible from now on? There's a lot of uncertainty about that. And inside ABC, too, when I was talking to people yesterday, they're very embarrassed, and there's also frustration that he was allowed to go to air with this report. It should have gone through some sort of vetting. It seems it didn't, and it's even particularly bad here because his track record's not very good. He's had several high-profile mistakes, and he went to air with an explosive report that caused the market to tank based on a single anonymous source that ended up being, you know, not correct.
Here we have the media, the left-wing media reporting on the left-wing media. Never thought I'd live to see that. Let's look at some of the tweets that were taking place at the time. December 1st, here's ABC's news correction. Go ahead and bring them up. Correction of ABC News special report. Flynn prepared to testify that President-elect Donald Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians during the transition, initially as a way to work together. Correction. During a live special report, ABC News reported that a confidant of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn said Flynn was prepared to testify. Okay, next. ABC News statement on Mike Flynn. We deeply regret and apologize for the serious error we made yesterday. The reporting conveyed by Brian Ross during the special report not been fully vetted through our editorial standards process. They have one. As a result of our continued reporting over the next several hours, ultimately we determined the information was wrong. We corrected the mistake on the air. Hours and hours later, it's vital we get the story right and retain the trust we have built with our audience. You don't have any. Brian Ross will be suspended for 4 weeks without pay. He should be fired. Next. Brian Ross. My job is to hold people accountable, and that's why I agree with being held accountable myself. Wow. Next. President. Congratulations to ABC News for suspending Brian Ross for his horrendously inaccurate and dishonest report on the Russia witch hunt. More networks and papers should do the same with their fake news. Next. People who lost money when the stock market went down 350 points based on the false and dishonest reporting of Brian Ross of ABC News. He's been suspended. Should consider hiring a lawyer and suing ABC for the damages this bad reporting has caused, many millions of dollars. Well, it has been a terrible, terrible thing. Now, where are we with all this? We are exactly where we began. You heard Feinstein. You've seen the media in action. You've heard what I had to say about obstruction. This stuff they did to retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, this is Mickey Mouse stuff. Mickey Mouse stuff. I should have reminded you, and I'll remind you now, that Jim Comey had been asked about this when he was still FBI director in a closed-door session with the Committee of Congress, according to Brett Baer, who reported this through Catherine Herridge over the weekend. And Comey and his FBI guys decided that Flynn's comments were not intentional. He didn't mean to mislead the FBI, so they didn't bring any charges. But Mueller did. Because remember, back then, Comey was still FBI director. It wasn't about getting even with Trump till after he was fired. You know, one day what's going to be written about this story, it's early yet, but what's going to be written, we have enough here, is that we have rogue elements within the Justice Department and the FBI, rogue elements in the U.S. attorney world, too, the vast majority of whom are wonderful, wonderful, honorable, hardworking, patriotic Americans. But like any other organization, we have rogue elements here who have enormous power to seek, target, and destroy. That's what Robert Mueller is doing. He is on a hate mission. He is on a hate mission. Well, Mark, he got rid of that head of the FBI. Yeah, because the guy, he let it out of the bag that they were partisan. You don't hire 9, 10, 11 people out of your 16 prosecutors who are known to be partisans through their contributions. You want to make sure your office looks squeaky clean, but he wanted them because he felt these were the most ruthless hacks he could hire. Mr. Rosenstein, even though the underlying issue here is so-called collusion during the election with the Russians by Trump world, of which there's been none, Mr. Rosenstein, however, in the rest of his conveyance of authority to this special counsel, who he himself appointed and knew quite well, Mr. Rosenstein gave him a very broad agenda. Very broad agenda. So I'm just concerned this is going to get uglier before it gets better. And if the Democrats take the House of Representatives, it's going to get really, really ugly. All right, folks, I appreciate you staying with me through this. We'll keep an eye on it. That's it.